Hello everyone, this time let us know some information that integrates the five disciplines, which is the geography, economics, political, social, and philosophy or ideologies of some places in Africa. Royalty and religion in Ghana. We have here the Albacri's description of royalty in Ghana. The king's residence comprises a palace and conical huts, and the whole surrounded by a fence like a wall. And around the royal town are huts and groves of thorn trees. So these groves is where they keep their idols and bury their kings. At ito po ay protektado ng mga gwardya who permit no one to enter or find out kung ano ang mga ginagawa o pinagkakaabalahan nila. Mayroon din po silang tailored garments na kung saan ang maaari lamang na magsuot ay ang king and the heir presumptive, which is his sister's son. And the rest of the people wear wrappers of cotton, silk, or brocade according to their means. The ancient empire of Ghana was located in western Africa in the present day of countries of Mauritania, Senegal, and Mali. It was just south of the Sahara Desert and made up of mostly savanna grasslands. The Gambia, Senegal, and Niger were the major rivers of the region. The landscape of Ghana consists mainly of plains and low plateaus covered by rainforest in the west and Lake Volca in the east. Ghana grew wealthy from trade through taxation, along with gold and salt traders carried copper, silver, cloth, and spices. As Ghana was in a prime location between salt and gold mines, rulers taxed traders. Passing through Ghana and traders had to pay taxes on the goods they carried to Ghana and took away with them. So at its peak, Ghana was chiefly bartering gold, ivory, and slaves for salt from Arabs, and horses, clothes, swords, and books naman galing sa North Africans and Europeans. And the major rivers in the region such as the Gambia River, Senegal River, and the Niger River served as the means of transportation and trade. Ghana is a republic but not a constitutional monarchy. Ghana is governed by a republican constitution with limited powers assigned to the traditional leaders called chiefs. They were the one who dispute settlement, codification of customary law, arrangement of ceremonies and festivals, organization of communal labor, and promotion of socio-economic development. Ghanaian society is hierarchical. They had rulers, nobles, farmers, craftspeople, traders, and slaves. People are respected because of their age, experience, wealth, and/or position. And sa kanila, older people are viewed as wise and are granted respect. And in a group, one can always see preferential treatment for the eldest member present. And the religion of the Kingdom of Ghana was a polytheistic and animist one. That is, Ghanaians believed in more than one god and believed that all natural objects such as trees, rocks, and mountains had a spirit. The Ghana Empire crumbled from the 12th century CE following drought, civil wars, and opening of trade routes elsewhere, and the rise of the Soso Kingdom and the Malay Empire. So the greatest of the empires that emerged after the destruction of Ghana was Mali, extending from the Atlantic coast inland as far as the trading cities of Timbuktu and Gao on the Niger River. Mali built its wealth and power on the gold trade, but the heartland of Mali was situated in the south of Sahara in the Savannah region na kung saan there was sufficient moisture for farmers to grow such crops as sorghum, millet, and rice. Mali was a product of a southerly Mande group. They possessed fertile land, which afforded better conditions for agriculture and gave them more direct control over the alluvial gold fields. And in Mali Empire, traders would exchange gold, salt, ivory, and slaves for goods such as textiles, spices, and luxury items like silk and ceramics. The farmers lived in villages ruled by a local chieftain called a mansa. Mansa Musa was the king of the West African state of Mali, was one of the richest and most powerful rulers of his day, whose primary contribution to his people was probably not economic prosperity but the Muslim faith. The Mali Empire was a stratified society with a strict hierarchy. The emperor was at the top, followed by the nobility and commoners. Within each group, there were further divisions and subdivisions. For example, among the commoners, some worked in agriculture, those working in the trade, and those were soldiers. Islam was important to the Mali Empire. The Mansas or kings had converted to Islam, but did not force their people to convert. Most people practiced a version of Islam combining local traditions with Islamic beliefs. Next is we have the city of Timbuktu. City of Timbuktu is the most storied of the cities that emerged under the Kingdom of Mali. Timbuktu was one of the most important cities in the Mali Empire because of its location near the Niger River bend, and so it was fed by the trade along the east and west branches of this great water highway. After a shift in trading routes, particularly after the visit of Mansa Musa around 1325, Timbuktu flourished from the trade in salt, gold, ivory, and slaves. It gradually expanded as an important Islamic city on the Saharan trade route and attracted many scholars and traders. And in 1468, the city was conquered by the Songhai ruler Sunni Ali. He was generally all disposed toward the city's Muslim scholars, but his successor, the first ruler of the new Askia dynasty, Muhammad Askia of Songhai, used the scholarly elite as legal and moral counselors. Next, we have the Great Gate of Marrakech. In Berber language, Marrakech means pass without making a noise. The Moroccan city of Marrakech, founded in the 9th century CE, was a major northern terminus of the trans-Saharan trade and one of the chief commercial centers in pre-modern era. Pinupuri ito ng mga famous travelers as Ibn Battuta. The city was architectural marvel in that all as major public buildings were constructed of red sandstone. So shown here is the great gate to the city, through which camel caravans passed en route to and from the vast desert. Sa Berber language, market means pass without making a noise, which is kailangan gawin ng mga caravan traders who had to be alert to the danger of thieves in the vicinity. Morocco consists of a central spine of mountains flanked by desert and plains. So the major resources of the Moroccan economy are agriculture, phosphate material, and tourism. The country exports citrus fruits and early vegetables to the European market. Its wine industry is developed and production of commercial crops like cotton, sugar cane, sugar beets, and sunflowers is expanding. Morocco's political system is constitutional hereditary monarchy. The monarch, who must be male, is the head of state. Morocco were actually ruled by a king, and their first monarch was Idris ibn Abdallah. Historically, Moroccan society was centered on a patriarchal, extended family, including the nuclear family of parents and siblings, as well as relatives by kinship and marriage. Socially, there are two contrasting groups of Moroccans, those living in the cities and those in the rural cities. Among the rural, several classes have formed, such as landowners, peasant, and tenant farmers. Peasant is a poor person of low social status who works on the land, used of people who lived in countries where farming is still a common way of life. And more than 99% of the population is Sunni Muslim, and less than 0.1% of the population is Shia Muslim. What do Sunni Muslims believe? So, Sunni Muslims hold that they must have faith in Allah and His prophets, believed in the righteous deeds presented in the Quran, and accept Muhammad as the final prophet in order to even get a chance at entering paradise. Muhammad, in other words, is peace be upon him. Shias naman believe that God always provides a guide, first in the direct descendants of Ali, known as Imams, and then Ayatollahs, or experienced Shia scholars who are sought of as a source of emulation. The sect splintered due to differences over the proper line of succession among Ali's descendants. The emergence of state in Africa. By the end of the first millennium CE, organized states had begun to appear in various parts of Africa. The extensive emprises of Ghana, Mali, and Songhai emerged at different times and did not exist simultaneously. Now we have the states and non-centralized societies in Central and Southern Africa. First we have the Congo River Valley. Rainforests of the Congo Basin share many characteristics with the Amazon rainforest and other tropical forests worldwide. High diversity, dense vegetation, and multiple layers of forest structure. The economy of the Republic of the Congo is a mixture of subsistence hunting and agriculture, an industrial sector based largely on petroleum extraction and support services. Government spending is characterized by budget problems and overstaffing. The social system of pre-colonial Congolese societies was traditional patrimonialism, tradition, and religion. Place the chief or the clan leader in the top of social hierarchy. The patriarchy or matriarchy of the extended family was thus reflected in the higher level of social organization. In 1930s and 1940s, Congolese from all classes and ethnicities protested against French rule and religion and generated messianic groups throughout the South. These groups are Christian and monotheistic but retained traditional beliefs such as polygamy and advocated a return to African roots. Common traditional beliefs include the presence of divine spirit in natural objects, ancestors playing a role in the lives of their descendants, and witchcraft and sorcery being related to illness. In general, the Congolese accept Western medicine and consider it effective. Zimbabwe, in the regions immediately to the south of the Zambezi River, a mixed economy involving farming, cattle herding, and commercial pursuits had begun to develop during the early centuries of the first millennium CE. Major exports include gold, tobacco, metal alloys, cotton, and sugar. The principal imports are fuels and petroleum products, electricity, machinery and transport equipment, food, and miscellaneous manufactured goods. Zimbabwe, Zimbabwean society is generally very patriarchal, while there are some minority tribal groups that are matriarchal and matrilineal. Men generally hold more decision-making power. Within the family, the oldest male, usually the father, is the patriarch and expected to be the breadwinner for the entire household. Like many African communities, traditional Zimbabwean religion has a firm monotheistic faith rooted in the belief in one supreme creator. Today, this has been melded with the Christian message into the syncretic faith, part Christian, part tradition, that is followed by at least 50% of the people. Southern Africa, south of the East African Plateau and the Congo Basin, is a vast land of hills, grasslands, and arid desert, stretching almost to the Cape of Good Hope at the tip of continent. As Bantu-speaking farmers spread southward during the final centuries of the first millennium BCE, they began to encounter Neolithic and foraging Napamumuhay, the Khoi and the San. These two such people were related because of their language, which is known as Khoisan, distinguished by the use of clicking sound. The Khoi were herders, while the San were hunter-gatherers who lived in small family communities of 20 to 25 members throughout southern Africa from Namibia in the west to the Drakensberg Mountains near the southwestern coast. And to learn more about the early life of San, archaeologists have studied rock painting found in caves throughout the area. So they found out that these multicolored paintings, which predate the coming of the Europeans, were drawn with a brush made of small feathers fastened to a reed. And they also found out that the hunting techniques and rituals of Sans, they use hand bow and arrows with poisoned heads as their hunting techniques, and the great medicine or healing dance and the rain dance were rituals in which everyone participated. Africa, a continent without history. The cradle of humanity is in Africa, yet the continent still considered by many to have no history, and it was argued at the time that Africa had no history because history begins with writing and thus with the arrival of the Europeans. Their presence in Africa was therefore justified, among other things, by their ability to place African in the path of history. Sa kanilang lahat, sa kabila ng lahat, Africa have made a significant contribution to the human experience kasi the African people were at the forefront of the agricultural revolution in the 9th and 8th millennia BCE. In African society, it is difficult to generalize about the social organization, cultural development, and daily life in traditional Africa because of the extreme diversity of the continent and its inhabitants. One quarter of all the languages in the world are spoken in African, and five of the major languages are located there: the Swahili, Arabic, French, Hausa, and Yoruba and Oromo. And because many of these languages did not have a system of writing until fairly recently, historians must rely on account by occasional visitors such as Masudi and Batuta. Masudi was an Arab historian and geographer known as the Herodotus of Arabs, and Ibn Battuta was a Berber Maghrebi scholar and explorer who traveled extensively in the lands of the Afro-Eurasia, largely in the Muslim world. Urban life. African towns after began as fortified walled villages and gradually evolved into larger communities serving several purposes. Nandoon yung mga artisans na hasa sa metalworking or woodworking, pottery making, and other crafts. And in urban life, the relationship between the ruler and merchant class served to reduce the gap between the king and his subject, and it was mutually beneficial since merchants received honors and favors from the palace, while the king's coffers were filled with taxes paid by the merchants. Village life. In village life naman, their identities were established by their membership in a nuclear family and a lineage group, and they lived in small round huts na gawa sa packed mud and topped with a conical thatched roof. Role of women. In Africa, in some cases, women were valued for the work they could do or for their role in increasing the size of the lineage group. Women often worked in fields while the men in the village tended the cattle or went on hunting expeditions. In many African societies, lineage was matrilineal rather than patrilineal. Slavery. Slavery existed in Africa before Europeans arrived. Slavery in historical Africa was practiced in many different forms: debt slavery, enslavement of war captives, military slavery, slavery for prostitution, enslavement of criminals were all practiced in various parts of Africa. Slavery for domestic and court purposes was widespread throughout Africa. Lineage groups, women, and slavery played a huge role in African society because they determined much of what people would do in life and where they would stand socially. Lineage groups showed who you were related to before which would depend your status. African culture. In early Africa, as in much of the west of the world at the time, creative expression, whether in the form of painting, literature, or music, was above all a means of serving religion and social order. Painting and sculpture. The oldest extant art forms in Africa are rock painting, and the most famous example are in the Tassili Mountains in the Central Sahara, where the earliest paintings may date back as far as 5000 BCE. Mayroon ding two-horses chariots used to transport goods prior to the introduction of the camel. Mayroon ding rocks paintings na makikita sa Nile Valley and Eastern and Southern Africa. Ang mga remarkable statues, masks, and headdresses were carved from living trees at ginagamit po ito bilang costumes ng mga singers and dancers in performances. Another example is the Fang mask of Equatorial Africa na ginagamit for initiation ceremonies and for entertainment and festive occasions. Yung mask nila is decorated in white clay na kung saan it conveyed the embodied spirit of deceased so as to protect the village from evil forces. Music, katulad ng sculpture and carving, African music and dance often served as religious function. With their characteristics heavy rhythmic beat, dances were a means of communicating with the spirits. A wide variety of instruments were used in African music during the traditional period, including drums and other percussion instruments. In African, songs are used for the important events in person life like birth, coming of age, marriage, and death, and they are used for curing the sick, bringing the rain, and of course, for religious dances. Architecture. What is true about African architecture? So, African architecture relies on available materials, and we have here the most famous architecture in Africa, the Hikma complex in Niger. It is one of the greatest architectural heritages in Africa, and it was designed by Miriam Kamara and Yamasan Ismaili of Studio Chahar. The contribution of African in architecture is that African builders developed engineering processes to use columns and stone masonry, and they developed methods to move large quantities of stone to build the pyramids and other massive stone structures. A West African oral tradition. Folktales. West Africa's oral tradition includes hundreds of old stories called folktales. West Africans used folktales to pass along their history and to lead young people morals and values. We have here the epic of Sanjara, which relates to Sanjara's struggle in his childhood to overcome his handicap, his kindness and generosity to his people, as well as his filial piety to his mother, Sogolo. And unfortunately, the weak Sasuma, jealous of both mother and son, forces them into exile. Sanjura, as the founder of the Mali Empire, was recognized as one of the most important heroes, and throughout the centuries, the epic of Sanjara was multiple times retold by griots, which is the storytellers of demanding people. Literature. Literature, in the sense of written works, did not exist in sub-Saharan Africa during the early traditional period, except in regions where Islam had brought the Arabic script from the Middle East. What is a bard in literature? Bard, a poet, especially one who writes impassioned, lyrical, or epic verse. Bards were originally Celtic composers of eulogy and satire. The word came to mean more generally a tribal poet gifted in composing and reciting verses on heroes and their deeds, and they were highly esteemed and served as counselors to kings as well as protectors of local tradition. They were revered for their oratory and singing skills, phenomenal memory, and astute interpretation of history. Now we have the expansion of civilization in South and Southeast Asia. Kushan Empire and the Silk Road. The Kushans were one of the two key middlemen during the First Silk Road's era, and ang isa ay ang Parthians. Nagdadala sila ng goods or products between Rome and China, and they would unify the overland Silk Road between the Oxus and Ganges rivers and establish themselves as cosmopolitan masters of northern India. Papaano naimpluwensyahan ng trade ang Kushan Empire? So the Kushan Empire linked the seagoing trade of the Indian Ocean with the commerce of the Silk Road via the Indus Valley, while while providing security that encouraged travel across the Kanjurab Pass and facilitated the spread of Mahayana Buddhism to China. At sa anong paraan natutulungan ng Silk Road ang Kushan Empire? The Kushans used the Silk Road to feed the trade routes that led to the warm water port of Karachi in Pakistan. What were some of the chief destinations along the Silk Road and what kinds of products and ideas traveled along the route? So the Silk Road network is generally thought of as stretching from a eastern terminus at the ancient Chinese capital city of Chang'an to westward endpoints at Byzantium, Antioch, Damascus, and other Middle Eastern cities. And China exported tea, silk, porcelain, ornate bronze mirrors, medicines, and paper. And in return, China received many kinds of products ranging from precious metals to horses, weapons, wooden goods, glassware, gold and silver, and precious stones and jewels. At yun lamang po, maraming salamat.